Okay, welcome to a brand new series I'm doing. I haven't made a video in a long time, but I'm back now. This series is going to be all about Netbox and technologies relating to Netbox. So AWX, Ansible ties into Netbox. Um, uh, Network automation more broadly too, because that is what Netbox is all about, is gathering data that can be used reliably for networks automation. So I'm going to start by just pulling up the official documentation to Netbox. Okay, and I'll read some of the Netbox. I mean, you can read it yourself, but just to make it really clear why I think this is exciting, and I'll speak to some of the points as well. So, what is Netbox? Netbox is an infrastructure resource modeling (IRM) application designed to empower network automation, originally conceived by the network engineering team at DigitalOcean. And one thing to note about DigitalOcean is if you've ever been through the certification struggle, there's somebody you undoubtedly came across named Jeremy, and I was never understood what his last name, how to pronounce it, but he would have been there on every step of the way because he's like the main person behind CBT Nuggets. He read a few books. He'll show up in yeah, he wrote a lot of Cisco Press books. He'll show up online everywhere. So he's the guy behind Netbox. So like for me, that was the one of the main things that got me excited about Netbox is this person who's so um, strongly tapped into what the he basically is the training side of this career, going off and building the tool he thinks is most critical and important at this point. Uh, to me, is like one of the biggest signs that this tool is something that should not be ignored. Everyone needs to know about Netbox. Everyone needs to learn Netbox now. Um, I'm kind of surprised Network Chuck, and sorry, I'm getting a little bit I'm just curious if Network Chuck even has a video on Netbox yet, because if he doesn't, he's got to get on that because I think this is really important. Oh yeah, he does. Okay, yeah, he has a whole interview with the author of Netbox. So this is something to check out. I can include this in the description. I think I've watched all of this, if not most of it. It's a 2 hour podcast, so it's sometimes hard to get into these, especially if they're kind of all over the place. But yeah, I think Netbox is the future. If not Netbox itself, then some kind of custom implementation of it or some kind of um, proprietary equivalent to it. If you don't have uh, the same kinds of design philosophies, which we'll get to soon, it's just going to be a lot more difficult to handle the data you need to build a network. Netbox was developed specifically to address the needs of network and infrastructure engineers. Netbox is made available as open source under the Apache 2 license. It encompasses the following aspects of network management: IP address management, IPAM, IP networks and addresses, VRFs, and VLANs. So yeah, all kinds of IPAM other tools are available. Netbox also does equipment racks, devices, connections, virtualization, and data circuits. So that's what is under a more broad term DCIM, data center infrastructure management. So already you can see there's a benefit in Netbox in that it does both IPAM and DCIM. on one platform. So you're uh, you're eliminating swivel chair, you're eliminating context switching. You're just having one tool to handle uh, multiple things. All right, so what Netbox is not? Well, Netbox strives to cover many areas of network management. The scope of its feature set is necessarily limited. This ensures that development focuses on core functionality and that scope creep is reasonably contained. To that end, it might help to provide some examples of functionality that Netbox does not provide. So they decided to draw a line, and we can see where that line is drawn. Um, they don't provide network monitoring, they don't provide DNS server, they don't provide a readiness server, they don't provide configuration management, which actually I'm not sure if that's true because I think there is configuration management included out of the box, and if not, AWX I believe does that, which is like closely tied to Netbox, and it doesn't provide facilities management. That said, Netbox can be used to great effect in populating external tools with the data they need to perform these functions. So right there, this is basically all you need to know about Netbox. It's your source of truth. It's where all your data goes. You're no longer putting your data in spreadsheets that don't have uh, that have open cells where you can just write whatever you want in the cell, and you don't have to have matching consistent syntax in your spreadsheet. You can have that in Netbox, but the power of it is you can make it so that uh, you don't have the ability to enter data that isn't in a standardized syntax, or that isn't valid data, and you can define what valid data is. So if you're just using a spreadsheet, you just kind of got to trust people to follow a syntax. And if it goes off the rails and there's something that you don't expect, your automation, if you're pulling in data from it, or whatever you're doing, even if you just have a human read it, you've got to just trust that whatever is put in there is going to be interpreted correctly. Whereas Netbox, you can put in uh, uh, data that is always that is a lot more reliable and clean and um, uh, yeah, and let's get into more of this. So the design philosophy is Netbox was designed with following tenets foremost in mind: replicate the real world. Careful consideration has been given to the data model to ensure that it can accurately reflect a real world network. For instance, IP addresses are not assigned to devices, but to specific interfaces attached to the device. And an interface may have multiple IP ad addresses assigned to it. So um, as opposed to a spreadsheet, you're just putting a IP address on the spreadsheet. It's like, well, where do I actually configure this IP address and how do I do it? Netbox, it's clear what every piece of data, like the context of the data is defined. Whereas if you're just freely putting it down somewhere or putting it in a spreadsheet, um, oftentimes it's just not clear what the data is even uh, what the data is, what context the data is meant for. Is it to configure an IP address on a physical port, on a SPI, on a loopback? On it's easier to do that in Netbox the way it's designed. Serve as a source of truth. Netbox intends to represent the desired state of the network versus its operational state. As such, automated import of live network state is strongly discouraged. All data created in Netbox should first be vetted by a human to ensure its integrity. Netbox can then be used to populate monitoring and provisioning systems with a high degree of confidence. So that's the biggest thing for me for Netbox is just this idea of having a source of truth and what that means. Because might not be clear to somebody with not who doesn't have a lot of experience in IT, is the network isn't always like, even if something is up and running properly, sometimes it's not clear if what you're seeing, even though it's working, is true. So a good example of this is, let's say you have a policer on a port and you're providing 30 megabits of bandwidth over the policer, but now you have a description on that port too, and it says 50 megabits of traffic. Then you ask somebody, um, like management, how much are they meant to get? They say they're meant to get 100 megabits. Then you look at you ask like the customer, how much were you expecting to get? They say we were expecting to get 80 megabits of traffic. So you can see there is no definitive. I mean, the customer is always right. So I guess if the contract doesn't say 80, in that case, getting that contract rewritten is the way to go. But let's say you do that. Now you've still got all this confusing data floating around. You've got the description, you've got the policer itself, you've got the disagreement in management and customer service. So where is this? Where can you write down this data so that in the future people don't come back to you and say, well, it said 50 meg on the description, so I configured a 50 meg policer. Well, what you can do is you can set up a source of definitive truth in your in your operations or in your procedures, where everyone knows it doesn't matter what anything says, even the service contract. If it's written this way here, this is the way it is meant to be, and that solves so many problems. And of course, if this is wrong, update it here so that it's propagated. But just having that agreed upon centralized location where everyone can trust the information, and that everyone is there's no one person saying, um, I say it, so therefore it is true. This is constantly vetted by humans to ensure its integrity, and not just like pulled from somewhere without uh, there really being that backing behind what uh, is actually true about it. Like, for example, the service contract, you could allow the project managers or sales into Netbox to make sure that figure is correct. You can delegate the responsibility for different places of Netbox, to make sure that the information is accurate. Um, so uh, so yeah, that's to me like the biggest power in Netbox is just a centralized source of truth, where you don't have to guess what uh, actually is meant to be on the devices. You can trust that there are humans vetting the integrity of the data, and most importantly, that you are accessing the data through the appropriate channels and in the appropriate location where you need to access the data. Excel spreadsheet on SharePoint. Well, do you have the right version of it? Do you have yeah, so like if you're looking at an older version, you weren't aware that there's a new version, somebody forgot to upload the newer version. The newer version is out of date, 5 minutes after it's been created, because things are in flux. With Netbox, you can designate things as planned or as ready to be implemented or as like ongoing, so you can get a very clear picture of the desired state of the network as opposed to the operational state. So whether or not a port is at 50 megabits per second, you can see, okay, it's meant to be at 200. We're ready to change it over to 200. Well, it says that it's not ready yet. It says that it's still being planned. So uh, we know that the truth of that is no in that case, because we have that source of truth and we're not guessing at uh, we're not guessing based on data that does not have a lot of integrity to it. Okay, so the next design philosophy in Netbox is to keep it simple. When given a choice between a relatively simple 80% solution and a much more complex complete solution, the former will typically be favored. This ensures a lean code base with a low learning curve. Application stack. Netbox is built on the Django Python framework and utilizes a PostgreSQL database. It runs as a WSGI service behind your choice of HTTP server. So you're going to access it in a browser, like a lot of monitoring tools are accessed. Yep, and then it ties into live devices as well using Kirkbyers, Napalm, open source automation. Okay, so I think I'm gonna cut the video here. This is just gonna be an introduction video to this new series of Netbox, and then I'll come back and we'll go through installation, configuration. We'll basically just follow the Netbox documentation and make videos that correspond to each section of it. So really exciting series. This is probably gonna be my favorite series I've done for a while, just because I believe in the power of this so much. I think this is basically what a lot of real world environments need, is a source of truth with vetted data that has high integrity. I think a lot of professional environments don't have that. So this is something I recommend anyone who's been following this channel, never heard of it before, check it out on your own. Um, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but just uh, having been pre-exposed to these skills, I think is going to be important as they become more and more wide spread. You don't want to be left behind uh, uh, when it comes to this sort of thing, because I think it's going to continue to be more prominent in the industry. All right, so that's it for this intro video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.